Hey everybody, James Nutter here from IM Wealth. Did you know that 3 of every 4 American families say money is their number one household stress? That means 3 of every 4 of your friends say money is their number one household stress. I too have felt it. I imagine you have felt it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here right now. So that's why we created the IM Masterclass, a safe space for you to learn with your friends and families how to take control of your money without making critical mistakes. And so thank you so much for being here. And please visit us at imwealth.com. We offer free financial wellness diagnostics, have a bunch of great resources on there for you. And without further ado, let's jump into the masterclass.
With that being said, who's ready to go? It's a very dark, gloomy, hailing evening in Michigan this evening. So there's nothing and no place that I would rather be at 5:30 p.m. than here with you right now. Welcome and thank you so much for just investing your precious time with us this evening. There's a zillion other places you could give your attention right now, like watching the latest release on Netflix or whatever it might be. So thank you so much for being here. So just going to start with just some basic self-assessment, reflective type questions. Also, introduction, forgot to introduce myself. James Nutter, Director of Client Experience and Financial Advisor at IM Wealth. And at IM Wealth, we help physicians and affluent families take control of their money so they can live more meaningful lives. So if you're listening to me, thank you so much for being here with me right now. So just by a show of hands, I know you guys, you can stay muted, you can go podcast style. Maybe you're somewhere else where it's nicer than Traverse City, Michigan right now, where maybe you're going for a walk or on a bike ride or working out or whatever it might be. So feel free to partake, turn on your video, but don't feel like you have to. But just quick show of hands, who here has ever felt overwhelmed, insecure, uncertain, or lacking freedom and security as it relates to money? I'm going to keep my hand right here and raise it because I certainly have. Who here has ever, and thank you, Kevin, I see their digital hand up right there. Who here has ever been frustrated that of the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'm just going to keep my hand in the air, you invested back into yourself in the form of education that they couldn't even have offered any more than perhaps just like a single adulting 101 class or basic money course or whatever it might be, right? Who here, based on tonight's topic, has ever felt that they weren't compensated according to their worth? I'll raise my hand a little bit higher. Who here has ever felt slightly burned or maybe misled from some type of contract at some point in your life? I'll keep my hand in the air. And I started at a larger Fortune 100 company starting at age 22. Just a quick story about me, right out of college. And it was a great place to begin my career. That's where I met my business partner and founder of our company, Jeff McPherson from IM Wealth, who couldn't make it this evening. But I met him there, so no regrets. It was a great place to start. But in signing my first contract at 22, I was like, okay, I love finance. I get to help people with money. No one knows anything about money, and I get to be an entrepreneur. Cool, check all the boxes, live my dream out. Let's do this dang thing. And I signed my contract. Once again, great place to be. But long story short, I found out after about my first year in the business that there was a certain sales quota expectation that I had to meet to sell X amount of insurance products on an annual basis. Otherwise, they basically would just kick me out of the company. I would have to leave and go find, greener pastures or whatever it might be. So in knowing that I got into the business to help people not sell insurance, that was frustrating to me. So quick pro tip right out of the gate, wink, wink, side secret here. When hiring a financial advisor, ask them if they have to meet a sales quota to be in their organization or if they have any conflicts of interest in working with you. That's just a side note, not what we're here for, but I thought I'd tell that story. So I just grew pretty frustrated. And obviously, Jeff and I exited and created IM Wealth in 2021, our own private practice. For many reasons, not ripping on anybody, grateful for that opportunity, but definitely was a frustration and not knowing that. So who here has ever felt in the dark from their employment contract? Who here is ready to just put an end to all this money and finance and adulting gray area BS that we all sweep under the rug here in America? We all spend money all day, every day, and simultaneously judge the person getting out of the Porsche, the beater, or someone by their Instagram profile. And yet it's taboo to talk about money with even our closest family members, maybe even our spouse, our partners, our parents, brothers, sisters, closest friends, whatever it might be. And yet there's zero real world education about it, especially for you as a physician who traveled a very unique path to be where you are today. You sacrificed most of your 20s and early 30s, maybe even longer than that, while all of your other friends were making money, spending money, traveling, buying houses, contributing to their retirement plans. Maybe, I don't think so, but LOL, who knows? And meanwhile, you were living your life like an Olympic athlete, saying no to everything, missing friends' weddings, missing trips, going into debt, and not being compensated according to your worth. And to get to this point, the biggest moment of your entire life, your first attending physician contract where you know nothing or little, and I'm not ripping on you for this, but they just didn't educate you about adulting, the ins and outs of that specific contract, and also your next contract and your next and your next. So if a pro athlete, who I would argue works just as hard as you do and did, especially in med school and training, understands and negotiates his or her contract like a pro, then why not you? That's another question for you to just be thinking about right now, and that's why we're here today. So once again, you're not alone in any of this. I do, financial advising, financial coaching for a living, and I have, grown through a lot of great, I call it the school of hard knocks. I had to go through the school of hard knocks to learn about money and learn the hard way and make mistakes, because I didn't even learn a lot about it until I got into this business, and now I'm 8 years in. So that's exactly why we're here today. 3 of every 4 American families say money is their number one household stress. I imagine you're familiar that 42% of physicians report burnout and depression. Every single year after year, that status remained pretty consistent, and money and lifestyle are always in the top 10, and time, right? All related to what we're here for today. So that's why we created the IM Wealth Masterclass. It's just a safe space to learn about money and how to make healthy financial decisions as families, and therefore go on and live more meaningful lives. So I know you're busy, we're busy, right? So our goal today is not to give you any fluff, no rah-rah, like no jumping up and down, no jumping jacks. We're just going to give you the info you need and let you get the heck out of here so you can live your most meaningful life. And at IM Wealth, we currently help, just a little bit more about us, 63 physician and affluent families, 67 total physicians and counting, take control of their money and live more meaningful lives. And for all others, like those of you here who might not be one of those, we give away a ton of free value, like what we're doing right now, hopefully better than what you'd find for some paid training or a rule of thumb Google search, like live like a resident or whatever it might be, doing things like this for free. And this is for 2 reasons. One, just to provide real world financial wellness. So hopefully you can take it, implement it in your life, and see results and evidence of progress. And please, if you do, bring it back to us. And 2, just earn your trust. If what we do for free helps you, maybe someday you'll reach out to us and ask if we could take the relationship to the next level and help guide you further. So just basic ground rules. I'm almost done with my intro here. I know, Spencer, I'm probably going a little bit long, but I always get long-winded. We just commit to no cost for these, no sales, no products, nothing like that. And because of rules number 1 and number 2, no bull, and you can use your wildest imagination. And then quick disclaimer that I have to put out there. IM Wealth does not offer individual financial advice outside of formal consulting agreement. Content discussed in the IM Masterclass is not and does not represent any financial, tax, and or legal advice. The intent of the IM Masterclass is to provide extremely valuable education for free. For personal questions, we hope you'll visit imwealth.com to see how we can help you and your family take control of your money. So with that being said, we have a special guest who's a health law attorney at Smith, Huey, Rice, and Rogie that regularly drafts and negotiates employment agreements and contracts from physicians and from the provider side. His name is Spencer Licktieg, and Spencer's overall goal for the conversation today, that's a nice zoom in you had there, is that when you get your next contract, you could recognize the impact that it's going to have, and he wants to give you a roadmap of a simple contract. We're actually going to look at a sample contract and give you a general overview, discuss common terms, common clauses, basically a 101 of everything you need to understand, what to know, what to look out for, additional considerations, maybe a few negotiation ideas. So then the next time you get a contract offer sent to you, you should know what the appropriate steps are to be. So with that being said, Spencer, I will hand the baton over to you.
So very much, James. Can everybody hear me? All right. I'm in a conference room, so I'm like talking to a giant TV. So the lighting's terrible, and I'm looking up perpetually. So if I'm too quiet, please let us know, and we can adjust it here. And also, I apologize that I have a second one that's for the screen share and everything. As James said, my name is Spencer Licktieg. I'm a health law attorney here at Smith, Boyd, Rice, and Rogie in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We do pretty much anything and everything across the board when it comes to healthcare clients. We have a lot of institutional clients with hospitals, physician groups, FQHCs, all of the full spectrum of it. And then we also work a lot with individual physicians and individual healthcare practitioners, anything ranging from nurses, psychologists, social workers, physicians, anything kind of across the board. And we handle sort of contract stuff for those individuals, as well as licensing issues and sort of anything else you can kind of find yourself in as a young practicing physician or healthcare practitioner. As James kind of suggested, there's the basis behind this entire presentation, the goal of this entire presentation, is to kind of give you guys a little bit of an insight. Because I'm assuming all of you are physicians. I believe that that's correct or accurate, or at least on your path or on your way there, or have conquered already 30 to 40 years of schooling, or whatever the average is at this point in time for physicians. And if my assumption is also that in all of that education that you guys have gotten, you have basically never touched anything about contracts, anything about law, anything about licensing, any type of stuff, short of maybe kind of a weekend seminar or one or two kind of classes in a semester, give or take, because that just sort of seems to be the tradition. And I think that's a problem. I think that's a huge issue, because you guys are going out there and you're in an incredibly, if not the most regulated field in the world, and everything matters when it comes to law and regulations, and you guys, I believe, would benefit so much from just a base amount of knowledge. So when I think of all of that, and I think about the stuff that directly impacts your guys' practices in the immediate, it comes down to your guys' contracts, because you go to school forever, you work and you work and you work, and you're getting paid really poorly the entire time, and your hours are absurd, and that probably won't change the hours portion of it. But once you kind of get that first big contract or that first big offer, it's so easy to just jump on it and just be like, oh, this is it. I'm doing it. I'm getting paid. I can finally just do what I went to school to do. And that's wonderful. And it's something that, it's a great moment. It's a great, great thing. However, that contract is in its own sense a very, very, very vital document. And it's kind of the rules, give or take, for your entire employment or your entire contract, basically, with whatever entity is hiring you going forward. And because of that, it's very vital for your own benefit and for your own happiness, to be honest, to know what's in it before you sign it. Because it's very, very common, it's very, very often that signing a contract is usually very, very easy to do. Signing it, stating it, it's easy. Getting out of contracts is a completely different beast. So if you get into something and it turns out to not be what you want, just the sheer knowledge of what's in it, what you're required to do, and how to get out of it can be night and day, and can hopefully make sure that you know where to go and make sure you're making educated decisions when it comes to that. And when we run into our clients here that are physicians that have this, I do this a lot. I help physicians I go through their contracts that they've got, and I just kind of map it through, explain certain things, and make sure that they see if there's any red flags or if there's any type of considerations that I want to make sure that they're aware of before they sign that dotted line. And because it's a big deal. Once that's signed, getting a contract changed, especially for the benefit or for the physician's benefit, is much, much harder to do, because inevitably you're going to be at a negotiating disadvantage, right? If you're getting hired by a hospital, they have all of the resources at their disposal. And that in itself is kind of one of the biggest reasons that I aim to do this. I was talking to James earlier, we won't go into very many specifics, but he was mentioning that some of our institutional clients, including my own, because we kind of forwarded this along Smith Hoy's own social media stuff. And I thought about, well, do I want to forward any of this to my own institutional clients, the hospitals that we help represent? And it became very apparent that it's probably not in their best interest for you guys to know anything about contracts in general, definitely not what's actually included in them and how you can kind of benefit from it, and giving you the confidence to negotiate and fight for what you want in a contract. Because you guys are always going to be, you know, physicians are always in need, and especially good physicians, which I'm sure that you all are always going to be sought after, whether it's from the highest health system in the most prestigious institutions. They're always going to want good physicians, and they're always going to want young physicians that have that potential. So give yourself that credit that you are worth negotiating, and you do have that clout, and you can fight for it. All right, there's a whole introduction there, yada, yada. I apologize. I'm going to try my best to keep the jargon and the lingo to a minimum and try to keep this as kind of a regular conversation. The entire premise basically that I have today is I'm going to go through a very skeleton version of what you can normally expect in an employment agreement. This is specifically an employment agreement, not an independent contractor agreement. Those are out there. Those are a completely different beast. I may touch on those every once in a while here or there, but the biggest thing that we were kind of focusing on was employment agreements, because that will be most likely what most of you will be dealing with, at least for your first jobs out there. So we're just going to work our way through this contract. We're going to just talk about the terms, talk about what you can expect, talk about how these things may impact the contract, and then sort of just work through and just kind of try to eliminate the general mystery of these contracts. Because, you know, if you have already seen one, or if you've had one in the past, or if you've gotten your first offers, you know, it's going to come to you. Some of them can be huge. We've had clients from huge health systems out in California have 80, 90-page contracts that they just get emailed and say, hey, here's a contract, get it back to us in a couple of days and sign it, you know, and that's intimidating. It's daunting. It's even more daunting when you open it up and it's huge walls of text and it's super legalese type of language. So it's understandable that it's, to in a way, kind of designed to not be in your benefit, or to be fair. And the hope from something like this, and the hope from the services that we provide, is to put you on a level playing field, if not, you know, put you in an advantageous spot. So that's kind of what we're going to be aiming for doing. I'm going to try to go through it. I'm going to try to be as efficient as I can. As you can already tell, I'm a little long-winded. I'm going to do my best. I've got a little internal timer here set for 30 minutes to make sure that I have a monitor on it to know where I'm doing, where I'm going. If you have any questions during it, let me know. But otherwise, there will be a time at the end for a Q&A and any type of clarification. And also at the end of all of this, afterwards, my contact information will be at the end. If you have any general questions, or as James will probably eventually mention, you know, there's all of you here by being here are available, or watching the recording are available to just reach out and contact me and just kind of get a free consultation of what we can offer and what we would do, just sort of on a general side. So if that's the case, I'm going to go ahead and start screen sharing this contract. We'll try to make it as smooth as possible. Again, if I go too fast or something like that, please let me know. And I will try to keep it as entertaining as possible for the kids that are here. I'm sure that watching a guy on a brick wall, and eventually you're just going to see a Word document, it's going to be the most entertaining thing that you can possibly find. So let's go ahead.
You're off to a great start.
Off to a great start, crushing it here. So, okay, we're going to pull this up, and there we go. All right. So, first and foremost, James had one at the beginning. We have to include this as well. I know it's a big wall of text. It's the first thing that you see. I apologize for that. But this is just a disclaimer at the top of this. We have to say this. You know, anything I say in this is not legal advice formally. This does not develop any type of formal client relationship or any attorney-client privilege as set forth in this, or any type of communications that are included in it. And most importantly, nothing in this should be relied upon for any actual full legal decisions. If you are making any of those type of decisions, I highly recommend that you either, you know, fully research it yourself, or contact a legal representative or an individual that can provide you that full guidance, be it me, James, or somebody else that has that authority on it. Do not just rely entirely on this. Again, this is a skeleton contract, and is intended to be exactly that. So, but yeah, so we're basically going to work our way through this, and we're just going to kind of, I'm going to minimize that so I can hopefully see myself. There you go. We're going to just kind of work our way through it. A lot of the text and details of this have been removed intentionally because the specifics of every contract is going to be radically different. And I didn't want to get you guys bogged down on looking at the specific language of how this is worded, how that's worded. But I thought just kind of having the subsections and having just sort of what you can expect in most employment agreements that you come across, this is what you're going to be looking at, or this is what you're going to find. I will just go ahead and preface it right now. The variety of the quality and size of contracts that you're going to see, whether you're going to see it yourself through your practice or multiple offers, or if you discuss it with friends or family or coworkers, it's huge. And we've been on the other side of it. This is a format of our contracts that we draft at our firm. We think it's clean. We think it's efficient. We think it covers everything that we usually need to do. But you know, I've seen contracts that are 3 pages that are basically pulled directly from some free website online. And I've also seen, as I said before, humongous juggernauts of these documents from health systems that include anything and everything under the sun that you could imagine. And you know, we're going to try to hit sort of a balance of that. So the hope is to walk through these terms, walk through these subsections, walk through these clauses, and try to introduce you, or at least, again, eliminate the mystery of what those are and what they would mean for you as an employee signing that contract. So there we go. I apologize. I will try to make this as smooth as possible. I know the jerkiness of a PDF can be a little distracting. So this is kind of how it's usually going to start off. This is a typical contract format. You've got the kind of title up there. It's going to list the names of the entity that's hiring you. Here we have it as a hospital, and it's going to list your own name. You may have addresses in there. There may be other parties, but it's going to kind of lay it all out there. It's just called the recitals. It's very, very general. The important thing on here, some may have it, some may not. It's the signing date. And there's going to be a couple kind of important terms that you're going to see throughout these that are going to matter on any of these contracts that you run into. And signing date is one of them. And the other one that you're going to be, when it goes to sort of the term and how long these last, when they become effective, is the effective date. And it's there in 1.1. So the term effective date, it's the date that the physician will commence employment with the hospital pursuant to the terms and conditions of the employment agreement, and it shall be today. So what that means, what the effective date means, and why it's so important. So you have the signing date, right? Signing date is when the parties sign the contract. That's great. In your mind, you think once that's signed, congratulations. You know, I've signed the contract, they signed the contract. I am now an employee of the hospital. However, a lot of contracts have that signing date, and it's true that once you have both are signed, you do have a binding contract. However, most contracts are going to have a separate designated date of the effective date. And this is going to be it's very common. So like if you're a resident and you're finishing off your residency, or if you're finishing off a fellowship or something like that, you could have it signed November 8th, but you're not going to start until April or May of next year, or even a year late. But they want to get you signed on it, and they get that kind of set in stone. What that means, though, is that a lot, if not all of the terms of these contracts that are included in it, or unless kind of specified otherwise, don't actually become binding, or the obligations that are tied to them aren't actually created until that effective date hits. And in some ways it makes sense, like salary. They're not going to start paying you until you start, right? That makes sense. Benefits, you're not going to get health insurance until it starts. That makes sense. However, there are some things that you need to be aware of when it comes down to it, and we'll see it as it kind of comes up here, but I just want to emphasize the difference between those signing dates and the effective date, and the knowledge of that effective date being that's when everything starts happening. That's when the obligations exist. That is when you fully and happily become an employee of hospital or of the facility. So again, we're going to come back to that term quite often throughout these contracts. It's a very important term, especially for a lot of early young employment agreements or young physician employment agreements. So there's probably going to be a reference here to hospital policies or policies and procedures. It's going to be a defined term usually. And what that's going to kind of refer to is the kind of whole smorgasbord or the whole library of their internal rules. So here it's the hospitals, their corporate bylaws, their rules, their regulations, their policies, their internal policies, their procedures, and then the medical staff bylaws, the medical staff rules and regulations. If you are working at a facility that has a medical staff. If you don't, if you're at a physician group or an academic medical center sometimes, or an FQHC, they may not have a medical staff and its own set of rules, but if they do, this is going to be it. And this is important to know because those are going to be, the contract itself is very binding. It affects your employment. It directs you and guides you on what actually impacts you and the rules of your employment. But what you actually have to do, and any time that you ever either get in trouble, not that it will happen, or if you need to know what to do, when to do, or how to do it, it's all going to be based on, and the hospital, the employer is going to rely on their own internal policies, procedures, regulations, bylaws, those type of things. Those are going to be the governing documents for your employment. So if you're ever considering, oh, well, if I'm trying to quit, or if I have a problem with a complaint, or if I want to file, some type of thing, or apply for, discrimination or disability accommodations or something like that, the number one thing that you're going to want to look for is you're going to go to the applicable rules, basically, of your employment, and those are going to have your policies, your procedures, the internal requirements that are tied to your employment. Especially if you have a medical staff, if you're a part of the medical staff, that is going to be a huge component of it. And it's going to include kind of everything that you end up doing administratively through your practice and through your employment. So next up, again, these are just kind of a defined terms. And it's important to know, usually contracts will have these sections to make sure that any type of these capitalized terms, they mean what they're defined as here throughout the rest of the agreement. So if there's ever any question, hospital policies is not some vague term. Hospital policies means all of their internal documents, the bylaws, rules, regulations, etc. And another big one that they may do, or that you should always aim to kind of try to include, is a definition of the actual specialty or practice that you're being hired to do. So here we set it up as a family medicine, it's just family medicine physician. And you wouldn't think that it matters to have the term family medicine defined and to make sure that it's clear what that includes under your contract. But what this does is this ensures that when you are practicing, when you are employed, when you're actually out there putting in hours, seeing patients and doing other things, that the expectations that they have of you and the requirements that they can have you do, the services that they force you to do or they require you to do, they fall under a certain umbrella. So normally we have this as family medicine, as generally shall include, the practice, the scope of practice of family medicine physicians as defined by the AMA or the, those credentialing entities, to try to keep it limited, because you never want to be in a spot where, you're a family med doctor and then suddenly your employer's like, look, we're really short in the emergency room. We need you to go down there and cover. If that's the case, you have a basis from your contract, if that definition is there, that basically says, look, one, you never hired me to be an emergency room physician or provide those emergency room services. And two, technically under my contract, most likely, and we'll get to this later on, I'm not getting paid to provide anything except for family medicine services and whatever that includes in the definitions of that contract. And again, I want to emphasize, I'm going to be addressing this a lot during this presentation, that it may seem like a lot of things are coming up, 99.9999% of the time, it won't matter. You're not going to be running into employers that are going to be rude or pushing against you or anything like that. But the chance of it, if it does, you want to make sure you're protected. And that's always kind of the important thing. So is there ever a chance that they wouldn't pay you if you covered for the emergency room? Probably not. But you want to make sure that if they don't, you have some type of response, some type of remedy. So a big thing here, and we already talked about it, medical staff membership. If there is a medical staff for wherever you're being employed by, or if you're a physician group, you may be required to become an active medical staff member of the facilities that you're working at. A lot of contracts are going to require that you become that, including passing all the credentialing and abiding by all the rules, et cetera, et cetera. And you need to make sure that you're aware of that, because at a certain point in time, it's balancing, especially if you're a physician group that's being contracted out, it can be a lot of balancing here or there. Of making sure that you know which medical groups you're part of, the obligations included therein, and to make sure that you're abiding by all of the rules that are set forth in those, all of their bylaws. If it is just a hospital and it's just a single one, it's a little bit easier, but again, it's something that you need to remember and know that if you are required by this contract to always be an active member, then you have to make sure that you know what that term means according to the bylaws and make sure that you can follow through. So this next section here for prohibited business activities. So this is again something, and kind of goes along with what I mentioned with the family medicine. All these subsections or all these contracts are going to most likely have some type of a section where they limit sort of what you can do outside of your own practice. They want to make sure that, you know, if you are an employee of hospital, that, you know, you're not out there doing stuff or practicing medicine at other facilities or moonlighting or doing things like that. And people can tie you back to their facility. They only want you kind of providing those services and representing yourself as a physician if they kind of have a control over it. So here, there's a lot of contracts that do kind of, and this is something you can negotiate specifically, you can kind of work out here. So you should not engage indirectly with other, medical clinical research or professional activities such as public appearances, lectures, expert testimony, which is a very, very common thing for physicians, consulting, medical directorships. Any of those type of teaching is a big one. If you want to go back and help teach, you want to make sure that your contract allows you or excludes those from any list of prohibited activities, because you don't want there ever to be a case you're like, oh yeah, no, I was teaching over the weekend, and they're like, oh, well, you can't do that under your contract, and then they use that as a basis to either, censure you or terminate your contract for whatever reason. Again, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's something to think about. You want to have those contractual protections in there to protect you, because I guarantee you that the facility that's hiring you, the employer, they have protections throughout this contract that's protecting them. So, and that's kind of the same thing. Here's the permitted stuff. These are the things that they otherwise you can kind of do. So this is kind of the biggest section that you guys are going to be most likely concerned about. And it's going to be the biggest sections probably of the contracts themselves. Yeah, we're cruising here. It's going to be your obligations. So your obligations under the contract. Most contracts are going to have two separate sections. They're going to have what, the employer has to do and then what the employee has to do under that contract. So this kind of your physician's duties, this is what you are obligated to do under this contract. It's what they're expecting you to do, and it's what you're supposed to do in order to get paid and get the benefits of the contract. If you don't do those things, then you have a risk of violating or breaking the contract or breaching the contract. Some of the more common things that you're going to run into here, organizational quality benchmarks. Almost all facilities at this point in time, I'm sure you guys have already been revealed to it, it's become very quantitative. They want to be able to gauge, how efficient you are, how many patients you're seeing, your record keeping, how your WRVU, all of that stuff. And they want your quality of the care that you're providing to be as high as possible. They want to do it from patient feedback. They want to make sure that you are providing good services and the patients like you. All of these things are going to be standards that they establish for all of their physicians or all of their employees, and they're going to hold them to you. And they may hold them to you as in a form of, if you follow them and you do well, you get a bonus. They may just do it as you're expected to do it. And if you don't do it, then, then there may be some type of action towards your employment or something like that. Similarly, along that is productivity expectations. So, I mentioned WRVUs. Those are relative work value units, which is a quantitative measure. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with it. And if you're not, you're going to become very familiar with them. And they're basically a value that is tied to every procedure or interaction that you have, sometimes or most likely with a patient, but sometimes just as provided that you're doing. It's them basically putting a number on what you did how you did it, and certain procedures or certain things are more WRVUs compared to lesser ones. And a productivity expectation usually will appear as a kind of goal number for that. And it's usually based on national surveys such as MGMA, which we'll get to at the end of this. But it's something like that. And they usually will tie something, either a bonus to hitting that productivity expectation or exceeding it, or sometimes you will have compensation or a salary that's entirely focused on basically the more work you do, the more you get paid. And we'll talk about that here later. But WRVUs and those productivity expectations, they should, this is important, should be set in stone in your contract, or there should be the methodology for determining it should be in your contract. You never want to try to sign a contract that just says, you know, and we'll set an expectation and, you know, sometime we'll figure it out. Because then what you do is you're risking them setting it way too high or way too low or moving it around. And you may have one really good year and they just double up your expectations or something like that. You always want to have an anchor in that contract of saying, look, you can't just jump me up 1,000 more WRVUs for my expectation just because I did well last year. You know, my contract says you have to go by this. Again, it's not, there's not a likelihood that it will happen, but if it does, you want to have the support of your contract. Another big thing you're going to run into is your work schedule. It's usually it can be very simple. It's usually something as vague as just like the physician and the hospital will work together on a mutually agreeable schedule or something like that. But sometimes it can be complicated. There could be Saturday shifts, or certain coverages that you may have to do, things like that. And it's always important to, once again, either have it set in stone in your contract or have the methodology set forth there, because you don't want to get into a spot that you're getting overworked like heck. You're not getting paid for it because you're being paid by salary and you have no recourse. Similar to that same thing is on call. If you're going to be responsible for on call, make sure it's in the contract, because again, you want to make sure that the only thing that you're doing at your job is, not to sound cynical, but you want to make sure that you're getting paid for the stuff that you're actually required to do. If at any point in time that they're asking you to do stuff that you're not supposed to do or you're not getting paid for, don't do it in general. Obviously there's the idea of, you want to be nice, you want to be a team player. I get it, I understand. But you have to remember that is a super slippery slope. And I know it's a cliche term, but it's true. All it takes, oh, hey, could you just do these quick, like just be a medical director just real quick. Or could you just, prompt this, or maybe could you just do a little introductory or teaching thing for the nurses, or this or this or this, or be a mentor to a medical student. It may think like it's something small, but by you doing it once, it's not a big deal. But as soon as they start expecting you to do it, then you're providing free services to them, and they've benefited entirely from that. And remember, the services, they're worth it. If they really want those services, they're going to pay for it. They're going to do it. And then if they do pay for it and they do have something added, tell them to put it in your contract, be in a minute. You always want it in writing. So the other kind of
Spencer, one sec. Kevin, I see you have your hand up. I'll just for the sake of time, can you note your question? I see you had 2 questions. We'll let Spencer get through all of it, and then we'll save it for the end. Appreciate it, though. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I will get to your questions. I apologize. My intro went way too long. I'm trying my best.
You're doing awesome, man. Keep it up.
Okay, so the other big thing that you're going to want to look at here is conditions precedent and ongoing to employment. So basically what this is going to be is a subsection or clause or an area in this contract that's going to list all of the things that you either have to have done before the effective date, again, your effective date of your contract, or within a designated period after your effective date, maybe 30 days, 90 days, or you have to keep it going throughout the contract. Okay, and stuff like this can be really obvious. Board certification, a valid license, a license to practice in the state that you're practicing in. You got to keep that up, which means you got to keep up your CME. You're going to have to keep up those certifications with certain entities. Here, the American Board of Family Medicine, or if you're an osteopathic physician, an American Osteopathic Board of Family Physicians. You know, those are going to be the type of things you have to keep those going. If you don't, or if you don't have them before that effective date, and this is the big thing, especially if you're, let's say you're in Michigan, you get a job offer in South Carolina, you have to make sure that if that contract says you got to be licensed to go in South Carolina before this effective date, you need to make sure that you're aware of that, because that means that you have to go through all the hoops that require to get licensure in South Carolina. And I can tell you by interacting with a lot of those licensing agencies, they're understaffed, they usually take forever, and sometimes they can get rotten. So always make sure you know what you're going to have to get into beforehand, especially here. You know, references, obvious. You know, if you have to get references, make sure you know about them. This is an active and uninhibited license. So if you ever have whatever, you know, some type of a matter that gets you censured, or you get put on probation by the state licensing board, and suddenly your license is restricted, you have to have somebody monitor you or something like that. Now, if you are required in your contract to have that uninhibited or unrestricted medical license at all times, once you get that, there is now a risk, and there is now a basis for the employer to potentially cut you loose based on the language of the contract. Again, will they do that? Probably not. But again, medical staff, background checks, compliance screenings, those are a big thing. You know, if you're going to a different state, if you're going to this, you have to pass all of these things before you get that hiring, or before you start that effective date. It's very important. Medicare, Medicaid certification, board certification, credentialing can also take forever, especially if you're a physician group and you have to bounce around to a lot of facilities. And then corporate compliance. This goes back to just sort of having to make sure that you comply with their internal policies and rules and regs that they have. Fees and billing. This is a really weird one, but it is something to just kind of note. You technically, under Medicare, Medicaid, only physicians are allowed to bill for their professional services. So, or healthcare practitioners that are able to bill for it. They're the ones that are able to bill. Most employers are going to have you reassign your rights to those billings to basically them, to the employer, and then the employer is going to handle all the billing. It's much easier for you. It's much easier for them. It's fine. But for some entities that are not, you know, full institutions or something like that, this is something to be aware of, to make sure, because if you reassign your Medicare billing rights, you are obligated and you're tethered to that. So if there's ever any issues with it, it can be tied back to you, which is something that, you know, again, it depends a lot on the language, but it's something to keep an eye out for. Employment term. So as we said before, it starts on the effective date, goes a certain period of time. Most contracts you're going to run into are going to have a specific set of years that you're going to be, that the contract is good. Some of them will have automatic renewal terms, which basically says that unless it's terminated, it's just going to keep going. There are also evergreen contracts, which are contracts that basically say, here's when you start, and it goes on into perpetuity. You know, we're just going to keep going. It's important to know those. It's important to know, because, you know, it may seem like you want a contract that goes on forever, but think about, in the sense that every, you know, if it lasts 2-3 years here for this one, at the end of that 3 years, you can now renegotiate your new contract, which means that you can ask for different clauses, you can ask for different pay, you can ask for any benefits or changes and like that, or you can potentially get out of that contract scot-free. And that's something to always think of when you're hiring there, especially if you don't know if you're going to be at that facility very long. Compensation. Obviously, this is going to be most important for a lot of people. It's understandable. I just want to stress that you look at, one, how you're paid. You know, again, here's an annual salary, aka you get paid $250,000 a year in biweekly payments. That's it. Doesn't matter. Boom, $250,000. Or there's production models, which again are based on your productivity. So they have a scale of their WRVUs per year or per month, quarter sometimes. If you, depending on, you know, if you're 100, if you hit 105% of the median of WRVUs, they put it over to the 105% of the median compensation for that. That's what you get paid. If you have a bad quarter and you get paid, or you only get 80, you get paid for that 80% of the median. It's that type of kind of fluctuation. For people that are really putting in the hours, it can be great. For the people that don't want to deal with that stress and have the option to, a general salary may be better. In addition to that, you may want to look at other things that include your compensation. Is there a signing bonus? Is there relocation cost reimbursement? Is there recruitment or retention loans that are tied to it? Or there's student loan assistances? That's all important stuff. It's all things that you need to consider, especially when you think of, if you're going to relocate to a different state. Maybe you take a little bit less salary, but you get that payment to make sure the move is easier. And it's also something to note that when you get paid for these type of things, for signing bonuses or something like that, you usually get signed, or you usually get paid the day that you get signed, and then like usually a few days out or around the actual effective date. They want to get you to sign it and promote you to do it, and then get you to make it all the way to the effective date without breaking it. So always be aware of those things. It's very, very important, and usually language can be just sort of stumbled over because you see the big numbers, and for some of you it's going to be a very large number and you get distracted by it, and that's great, but always think about that, and also think about the way these are, the way they're paid and what you actually have to do for them. Fringe benefits. So these are going to be your benefits. It's going to be your insurance, your health insurance, dental, eye care, life, accidental, retirement plans. If they cover any dues, employment-related professions for conferences or certifications that they're requiring you to have. Are they going to cover those? Any type of memberships to associations, anything like that. Medical or CME allowance. Are they going to pay a designated period or amount of money each year to your CME? Are they going to provide PTO for you to take that CME? These are all things that you should be aware of and look out for, because they may seem like you're like, I just need health insurance, I just need this. That's great. These are other things that you can negotiate, and these are things that can be very, very beneficial, especially because for employers, usually this isn't that big of a deal. It's an extra $5,000 for CME or something like that. But not having to pay for your own CME is huge, especially when you're required to do the CME under the contract anyway. The least that they can do is pay for it. Right along with that is PTO. Please, 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 please look at your PTO policy. Some of them are designated periods of time, 30 days every year, something like that. Some of them are, you can have unlimited PTO as long as your numbers continue to be good. Either way, please look at them, and please look at what's included as PTO. Because again, if they don't provide you PTO to take CME, to go to conferences, that means that if you do those things, you're going to have to take your own PTO for those, which is a bummer, to be straightforward. But please look at that and see when they refill. Is it just a full calendar year? Is it starting January 1st, ending December 31st, and then we refresh? Is it a rolling thing? Make sure you're aware of it. Professional liability insurance, almost everywhere you're going to go is going to provide this, especially for an employer or employee. Make sure, I am running long. Make sure that if it has tail or nose coverage, because if you do end up terminating that contract, you want to know that you're covered for everything you do. Termination of employment. So this is the most important thing I can kind of tell you guys for this. And I promise I'm gonna prompt this up and I'm gonna wrap it up. I know. Always, always, always. It is ideal that it all works out and everything is great. Always look at how a contract can be terminated, the least stress and the most stress, because it's going to be important for if you want to terminate it, and it's going to be massively important if they want to terminate it and they're trying to kind of, be a little slide or a little slimy. You usually have a mutual termination, which is inherent in contracts, which means that if the employer, if the hospital and you mutually agree, let's terminate this, then it can be terminated whenever the date that they agree on. Without costs, this is usually a designated period of time. It's 90 days, 180 days, sometimes it's a whole year. It means that either party can sit there and go forth and say, I'm terminating this contract. Here's the notice. I have to give you 90 days notice. In 90 days, this contract is done. They don't have to provide any type of reason. They don't have to provide any basis. It's just in 90 days, it's done. And that can be beneficial for you. It can be beneficial for them, but it's something to know. Termination for cause. These are going to be the things that's usually going to have a big list of stuff that you're supposed to do. Again, the compliance, keeping up with the certifications, making sure that you're providing and making sure that you're not, out getting arrested or something like that. Those are the things to be aware of, because if one of those things happen, ideally you hope that your employer is going to forgive you and understand and go with that. But if they don't, you want to make sure what they can use to terminate, because usually the termination for causes are immediate. And that's a big, big difference. And tied to all of this is compensation upon termination. If you are terminated, whether it's by agreement, without cause, or for cause, there should be a language in that contract that says what happens afterwards. How long are you paid for afterwards? Do your benefits extend? Do you get COBRA coverage? Any of those type of things are their non-competes, which you can see is one of the next kind of things that we pop into here. Speaking of which, we'll roll into it. Facilities, equipment, supplies. This is probably more important for if you have a smaller employer. Just make sure that it's clear who's supposed to be providing the office, who's leasing it, who's getting the equipment, that type of things. Make sure it's included in the contract so you're not held to that obligation when you show up your first day of work and they say, well, why didn't you bring a computer or something like that? So this is your non-compete. This is a very general one. This is actually a non-compete. It's a non-solicitation for patients and a non-solicitation for other employees of the hospital. These are very important. There is a chance, give or take, that the FTC is going to eliminate the legality of these in general. It has not happened yet. So until then, we have to deal with it. Basically, what they set forth is a duration, usually a couple years, and then a geographic range of where you cannot practice. If you are terminated, usually either you terminated the contract yourself or it's terminated for cause. If it's a mutual termination, usually these don't apply. Or if they terminate it without cause, usually it does not apply. But again, look at the contract language, make sure. Patient solicitation just says you can't solicit patients while you're there and then take them with you later. You can't call up all your patients after you left and be like, hey, stop going to the hospital, come to my new facility. It's the same thing with employees. They don't want you calling all of your past coworkers and telling them to come to your new practice. Dispute resolution. Make sure you have it laid out. Usually it's in the medical staff bylaws, but if it's arbitration, if there are fair hearings or peer review stuff, it should be in your contracts. It should be laid out. Because again, you want to make sure that it's clear because they'll use that to their advantage. You should also as well. Indemnification. This is a weird, stupid term, but it is very, very common. What it basically means is that the parties, this is a mutual indemnification. It can be one-sided as well. Basically says that the parties are going to stand by each other if something goes wrong. So if a lawsuit gets filed, it basically says that, the hospital is going to be there. They're going to, pay for your protection. They're going to pay for your representation. They're going to defend you, and vice versa. If the hospital goes under, they expect you to stand by their side as well. And a big part of this is it doesn't apply for intentional or like fraudulent or negligent behavior. So there are limitations. If you go completely, rogue, this indemnification clause may not protect you. It's going to be a humongous wall of text when you see it. And I apologize, but I recommend that you read it. It's going to be super jargony. This one is super jargony, but it's just something to consider. Last ones, I know, last ones, governing venue. This is just kind of important because basically some contracts will literally set forth that if anything is challenged in this contract, they will put the jurisdiction that it covers, which isn't that big of a deal unless it is. So for more national systems, they will set forth in their contract wherever the jurisdiction that they have the most advantage at is going to be designated here. It's not something you can usually super argue, but it's something to be aware of. So here it's going to be in Michigan, it's going to be in this county, because that's where we are present. That's where we think we're going to have the best chance of it. That's why they put it in there. Last but not least, inventions. It may not be something that's on your forefront here very much, but think about it as this. There's very, very commonly defined language that basically has an employer that they get a right to all of the inventions or any type of patents or trademarks or anything that you do using their resources or developed on your employment time. If you are interested in doing that, please make sure that there's protections in your contract that it covers that, because that's going to make it a lot easier if you can point to a contract that says, look, they're not trying to claim any of that stuff. It says it in the contract that it's mine. But again, it's always important to have it in there. The only other thing here, this is the MGMA table, as I kind of said before. So these are based on the 2022 MGMA Provider Compensation and Production Report based on 2021 survey. This is the average salary, median salary for 2022, for 2021 data for family medicine physicians. This is what your employer is going to be looking at most likely when they're giving you a number. When they're paying you, it's going to be based on a national survey. And as you can kind of see, they're going to have your expectations based on what they and how much work they expect you to do. Some professions have a ton, or some specialties have a ton of WRVUs. Some have a little small ones. It's either way, this is going to be the type of stuff that you can base over. And if you can get a contract that has them cited, then you can know for sure the numbers and the methodology that they're basing these things off of. And that's going to help in case they ever try to go off of that. You can be like, well, that's weird. You're supposed to pay me according to the MGMA. Here's the MGMA. It looks like I should be making more than I am. What's the beef? And that's pretty much, that's it. I'm sorry I rushed through the end of it here. To just kind of hit it. I mean, the biggest things I want to make sure you look at is the pre-effective date stuff that you have to do. It's so important. It's so important to make sure that you hit all of those. Because if you don't, and the effective date hits, and you haven't done all of those things, technically, usually under those contracts, the employer can just cut you loose. And then if they cut you loose, then you may have moved to South Carolina and gotten licensed in South Carolina for nothing. The post-effective date stuff, okay? What you're actually obligated to do. Compensation. Make sure you know what you're getting and make sure the limitations of what you're actually getting paid for. Termination options, please, 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 please. Always look at it and always look at the timelines. And then finally, anything that happens if you do leave, where you're paid, any type of restrictions that are established, and everything kind of going forward there. So I am sorry, I went way too long there. I do apologize. I am free to answer questions as long as you guys have for me. James, I will hand it back off to you. This is my contact information. Please feel free to send me an email or give me a call at any point in time if you have any questions about this, or if you are interested in that kind of that free consultation, or if you're interested in having us kind of look over your contracts, or even the next step up, which is actually being in your corner and trying to negotiate those contracts on your behalf and making sure that you get what you deserve when you're there.
Spencer, that was awesome. Let's all put our digital clapping hands together for Spencer. And that was not long-winded. You know, we committed 5:30 to 6:30. When you're talking about the ins and outs of contracts, you know, you got to do what you got to do. And that was epic. I learned a ton, so I appreciate it. And thank you so much. And yeah, for anybody watching this, or this was recorded as well, we're going to get it on YouTube. So anyone watching this, you know, I would definitely encourage you. Spencer just brought some awesome intel. And I know he's not like a lot of attorneys who's going to bill you when you send them an email. I'm being a little sarcastic, but you know, if you're watching this, you see the contact info on the screen, please reach out to Spencer. I know he's happy to do a free consult and answer one-off questions. So with that being said, I know I'm happy to stay, you know, 5 minutes extra or whatever it might be to answer questions. I don't know, Spencer, how you are on time, of course, but I know we had some questions. I know, Kevin, you had a couple that came up. Anybody, you know, raise a digital hand or unmute yourself. I'll let Kevin go first because I know you had a couple. So please go ahead.
Sure. So first one, well, thank you, Spencer. I appreciate all the discussion going through all that. Regarding the medical staff documents and everything, are there any specific gotchas or things that we should be looking out, you know, like, hey, if we get another COVID pandemic, then you're going to get called to the ED and I'm going to have to treat, you know, 90-year-olds, even though I take care of 90-minute-olds.
Yeah. So the biggest thing about the medical staff things is when you get it, when you apply for it, or when you're actually granted membership for it or anything like that, they're going to give you a copy of their bylaws, or at least access to their bylaws. And that's going to cover kind of everything that you're going to be looking at for it. It's going to be huge. It's going to be a huge document, most likely. It's going to have a bunch of stuff that you don't care about and that doesn't apply to your specific question or your situation, but most likely what you're looking at is also in there. The benefit of it, though, is that there are also like specific medical staff policies and procedures that they themselves set forth. There's sometimes documents called rules and regulations of the medical staff, which further explains those rules. And some of them may have what you just kind of referenced, which is basically, you know, in an emergency situation, or if this happens, or if this happens, you know, you will be obligated to do this. You will be obligated to do this. On-call coverage is a big one. A lot of medical staffs require active members to take on-call, even if your specialty does not have on-call considerations. And that's something to always kind of be aware of. The big thing about medical staff, though, is inevitably, if there's any changes to those medical staff stuff, it has to be voted on by the entire medical staff, usually. Like big changes to the bylaws have to get voted on by the entire medical staff, which means they have to inform you as a member of the medical staff. You usually have a vote for it, and they usually have like a informational feedback kind of thing. So you're usually not going to get caught by any surprises on it. Now, whether or not you have a lot of negotiating power there is a little bit of a push, especially on things such as COVID or those emergency kind of surprise situations there. We ran across a local healthcare client that they basically forced all of their employed physicians into a non-compete and also reduced their salary because of COVID. And the only benefit that those employers or those physicians got was the guarantee that they would remain employed. And that was definitely an illegal amendment to their contract in a lot of ways. But that was the type of stuff that, again, ideally they don't try to do this until they do. And that's something you can always kind of be aware of.
Thanks, Spencer. Yeah, Kevin, thanks. Great question. And thank you again for being here. Good to see you. Did you have another question too? I thought I saw you raise your hand twice. Or does anyone else have a question? Go ahead, Kevin, go.
So another question, how does some of the things like RVUs, other, I don't know, maybe other portions of the contract, how do those change, or what does that look like if you're in something? So I'm in neonatology, I'm a intensivist. So, I'm not typically out there, tripping pregnant ladies to get more patients and stuff. That would be frowned upon, probably covered elsewhere. So what does RVUs look like for someone like me? Or what should I be looking for?
Yeah, so they're gonna again. So when you use those surveys, the benefit of those surveys is that it is a quantitative measure. You can base it off of specialties, you can base it off of subspecialties, you can base it off of geographic ranges. Because obviously, the Midwest can sometimes have different expectations or different patient loads than the West Coast or the Northeast. So the good news about that, though, is they do break down your specialty pretty well. Pediatricians in general have very low expectations because they just the concept, you can only have so many kids coming through, right? And based on things like gastro has a lot, because you should be able to, the expectation is most gastros, because it's a limited enough field, should be working and should have consistent clients or patients kind of continuously. So it should be adjusted based on that, and it's something also to look at if they do set your WRVUs and they base it on an MGMA or a national survey. Make sure that they're applying your actual specialty to it, and make sure that that specialty is limited to it, because they don't really get a benefit usually to setting a WRVU goal way higher than you can achieve. But if they do, you want to make sure that you're aware of it beforehand. And it also may be one of those things that if as a young physician, it's naturally going to be kind of lower because they don't, it's going to take time to get your practice up and running and rolling, especially for very patient focused professions and specialties. So that also may be a consideration. So it's more just look at it, see, just be aware of it, and make sure that it does accurately reflect what you're doing and what your actual services are in your specialty.
So maybe I didn't ask that completely. So in intensive care, so I'm a neonatal intensivist, so I'm working only in the hospital. So I'm not really recruiting my own patients.
Right. And
that's maybe just something that just doesn't even apply?
No, so they're going to have a subcategory for it. And if they don't, then what you're going to want to look for is to make sure that they're not holding you to an expectation of your profession not in that. So it'd be, if you want to make sure what the WRVUs they're holding you to accurately reflects for you, or if it's different for a reason. So they may be like, look, we don't have your specific specialty, what we're hiring you in for a median, but this is as close as we could get, and we reduced it down or we moved it to make sure to adjust to your specific work expectations and what you're actually going to be doing.
Got it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Spencer. Kevin, Spencer, you okay with one or two more questions?
Yep, I am here.
I see.
I don't mean to keep people here. I was the one that went long, so I'm happy to sit here and answer questions as long as I can, as long as they are prepared.
You were great. Khalid, I see you have your hand up, and I believe I'm pronouncing your name correct. Is it Khalid or Khalid? I apologize. I know we spoke on the phone.
Both are good. Thanks, Phil. Both of you. My question is about contract renegotiation. So my contract is going to finish at the end of June next year, and my question is, when should I expect them to renegotiate things with me, or we're going to go to kind of holdover period after that? That is not clear to me. I had my first contract, and then questioning mostly what's going to come after that.
Of course, and that's a great point, and I just realized it's something I didn't put. Holdover is a big component, and there's a general law or the general rule in contracts is if there is a contract and the duration or the term of it ends, and the parties keep just going on like the contract was still there, then kind of by the law the contract just keeps going until one of the parties suggests otherwise. So in a holdover situation, as you kind of recognize, it's basically, look, we haven't gotten a new contract figured out yet, so we're just going to keep rolling even past the designated term of the contract. We're going to keep rolling, same terms and conditions until we get this figured out. For you, when you're going to be renegotiating it, I would look at your current contract. You can request it. It usually isn't a big deal. It's usually not a big red flag if you ask for it. Look at what their terminology or the termination language is going to be for it. To make sure that you can kind of see, to make sure you don't get caught off guard. So like if it's no, if there's a no cause clause in there for 90 days and your contract, you're still 180 days away from when it ends, you don't want to be surprised by you're thinking that, oh, we're just going to renegotiate, this is fine. And then in 90 days from your date, you get that notice that they're planning on terminating it or just not renewing it. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of, if you're confident that you want to stay there, start talking to them. Reach out to your supervisor or the medical director that's involved with it, or one of the administrators that's kind of in charge with it, or you can find, and just basically say, hey, my contract's coming up. I know that we may be looking at renegotiating or doing it. I'm ready to discuss that, or I'm looking forward to doing that, and you just let me know, because it's going to benefit them more to get you renewed sooner rather than later, because there's nothing that they want more or want to avoid more than getting to the time when your contract's supposed to end and they don't know whether or not they're going to have a physician at that time. They don't know if they can schedule you. They don't know if you're going to jump ship as well or leave mutually. They want to make sure they benefit from that just as much as you do. Once you start negotiating the actual terms and the clauses, base it, if it's with the same facility, base it on what your experience with that facility has been. If you have found that you've been asked to do a bunch of extra work here or there, or going to a bunch of meetings, or a bunch of this stuff, or it seems like your WRBU numbers or your expectations are higher than you'd like, utilize that when you're renegotiating it, because that's going to be, you have a little bit more of that insight with that employer that you're staying with.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Does that make sense, Khalid? Go ahead. Okay, cool. Thank you, Spencer. Appreciate it. Taylor, I see you have your hand up. So great to see you, and Waylon. Thank you for being here. Go ahead.
So just a question. I'm interested in, while I'm in the military right now, once I get done, I'm interested in teaching, being part of residency. So is there any extra specific catches or words or things I need to pay attention to when making a contract with a university system?
That's going to be pretty specific. When you're dealing with an academic medical center or a university system like that, they're very unique in that way. And I know it sounds like a cop-out here, and I hate that it does, but that's going to be, it's going to depend a lot on the specific entity. It's going to depend a lot on the specific state that it's in, and kind of what you're doing. If you're just going to be full teaching, if they're going to want you to actually provide services and do clinical stuff at the facility when you're not teaching, in addition to training programs, that's going to depend very heavily on the specific contract. So in those type of things, I mean, it would have to depend very much on the specific contract and reviewing it based on what their terms are and what their expectations. But for those type of facilities, especially if you want to teach, that's when you want to make sure you keep an eye out for making sure that, if they do require clinical stuff, making sure that the clinical balance is there for your teaching balance of what you want to do. If you want to mainly go there to teach, then, limit the clinical stuff as much as you can, or if you need to, or vice versa. And just kind of be aware again with those that make sure that they are clear about your duties under your employment, that they don't make you do other stuff that you're not contractually obligated to do. Because a lot of those academic medical centers are stretched a little thin, so they may kind of utilize their physicians that are there as much as they can. You've all been through medical school and residencies, I'm sure. You've seen it. You guys probably got assigned to things that you probably shouldn't have been doing by yourself, or probably should have been a little bit more supervised. They're stretched a little thin, so just always kind of be aware of that. The other kind of big thing is it depends on the type of entity. If it's a state school, if it's a private school, that's going to depend on a lot of your insurance coverages and sometimes your benefits. And that's something to kind of always keep an eye out for. But otherwise, it's very specific. Yeah, it's very specific.
Hard to negotiate a pay, or is that kind of like capped because it's a state public school or something?
It shouldn't be. I mean, it's gonna depend. It may be a little bit harder to negotiate, and there's probably going to be a lot of pushback, and they're going to use that as a basis, right? They're, oh, sorry, we can't pay you. The state's only giving us this much. They have the money. They know what their budget is. They know what they're doing. So that may come into play a little bit, but if they want you and your specialty is there, they're going to pay you for it. And a lot of that stuff, especially for good professors or good clinicians, they're going to want you there. And, always remember that there is a competition. There's plenty of medical schools out there. Obviously, whatever works best for you is something to focus on. But always remember that, they are trying to pursue you. And it's not always, you don't always have to cave to what they say. See if you can, market around a bit and feel free to actually try to negotiate. And if it is a hard sell or a hard no, then it's a hard no. The only other kind of weird thing I can tell you about state universities or state entities, whether it's a healthcare, like a county hospital or a state hospital, remember, just like football coaches and basketball coaches for those schools, your salary is technically public knowledge. Not that that matters, not that that should be a big deal, but just in case it is, it's something to remember that anybody and everybody could find out how much you make at any point.
Awesome, thank you.
Taylor, just a few things. I'm in academics right now, and few things that you can do. I found that the salary wasn't necessarily as negotiable, but certainly other benefits or how many weeks of service or how much service time or whatever it is. Other things like CME funding and stuff like that is all, that's all on the table.
That's a good point.
The other thing you can also ask for is the APRT, the appointment promotion reappointment and tenure documents too. Those will be pretty well specified at any academic medical center.
Awesome, thank you.
Kevin, thank you for that input. And yeah, maybe if you're okay with it, I could connect you and Taylor if she has any other questions or something like that. But don't want to put more on your plate, but if you're open to it, I'll reach out to you after this. Appreciate it. Anything from anybody else? I feel like we should, we appreciate you all getting here. We should probably let Spencer get the heck out of that suit and go eat dinner. While I'm over here looking casual. But any last second? Otherwise, we should probably wrap up here shortly. Okay. Just one last pro tip that I'll throw in from IM Wealth, from a financial advisory standpoint, is we commonly see when physicians have facts that come from a financial plan. For example, if I'm going to be moving from Grand Rapids, Michigan to North Dakota, how much income do I require to hit goals X, Y, Z, send kids to college, retire, pay off student loans, etc., to support their contract negotiations? Their success rate does increase. I would, of course, lean on Spencer and everything he shared, but we've seen clients go through that and be able to negotiate just by basing it off facts within a financial plan. And just to give you a head start for anybody watching right now, more of which for people on YouTube about how to do this, IM Wealth provides free financial wellness diagnostics. So if anybody wants to do that, who's watching this, whether in YouTube here right now, no pressure to do anything. You can scan this QR code. I'll leave this up here for a second. But with that being said, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody being here. appreciate all of you, especially, here, a lot of people from Michigan or the Midwest on, a gloomy, cold November night. So Spencer, thank you so much. Like I said at the beginning, no place I'd rather be right now with all of you. Appreciate all of you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And we'll hopefully have another couple master classes coming back up before year end, and some great public service loan forgiveness resources coming out soon as well. And then we'll be doing these every 4 to 6 weeks in the new year, all physician specific. So thank you all. Hope you all have a great rest of the day. Spencer, you killed it, man. I'll send you a quick note when we're done here, but appreciate you.
Happy to help. And again, if you guys have any other questions, or if you do reach that point that you get your contracts and you just want, it doesn't matter, I'm in Michigan, but I'm not reviewing a contract or talking on the phone it's not me practicing law in those jurisdictions. So if you are across the country, if you're anywhere that's not Michigan and technically Illinois, I can still help and just kind of review those. And it doesn't have to be a huge thing by any means, but it can be. I've found it to be very beneficial for those people, and I'm not just saying that because it helps me. So, but yeah, my contact information is there. Let me know if you have any questions, or reach out to James and he can connect us as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
IM Wealth does not offer individual financial advice outside of a formal consulting agreement. Content discussed in the IM Masterclass is not and does not represent financial advice, tax advice, and or legal advice. The intent of the IM Masterclass is to provide extremely valuable financial educational content for free. For personal questions, we hope that you'll visit imwealth.com and schedule what we call a free financial wellness diagnostic to assess the current state of your financial health and therefore help you and your family take control of their money so they can live a more meaningful life. So we'll see you there. IM Wealth does not